Ladies and gentlemen, thank you and welcome for Z Real Estate's weekly discussion on real estate. Thank you so much for joining me this week. We got a lot to discuss. Today is Friday, October 31st, 2014, Halloween. That being said, if I had to guess, I can only imagine what everybody out there is dying to talk about: the pending zombie apocalypse. Yes, folks, we're going to talk a little bit about zombies today. Not to worry, though, I really don't think a zombie apocalypse is coming anytime soon, although surprisingly, it actually does relate to real estate. So let's jump right in. All right, zombie foreclosures. They are increasing. What is a zombie foreclosure? And how does it relate to a regular foreclosure? And how does it relate, most importantly, to real zombies? Excellent questions, everybody. Thank you so much for asking. Okay, so here's what a zombie foreclosure is. Essentially, a zombie foreclosure is when the bank sends the borrower or homeowner a letter saying, guess what? You haven't made your payment in a long time and we're getting ready to foreclose. Well, 9 times out of 10, what usually happens when a borrower gets that type of letter is they vacate. They leave the property. And typically what should happen subsequently following their vacancy is the bank should then repossess the property, foreclose, sell it off to the highest bidder, etc. I'm sure you guys know how it goes from there. Well, unfortunately, the banks don't always have the funds on hand. They don't always have the resources or the effort or the energy to foreclose at that particular moment. So a lot of times what happens is they don't. Well, what is that called? What does that mean for the homeowner? Excellent questions. Okay, so hundreds of thousands of homes in the United States are now labeled as zombie foreclosures. That's when the owner of a foreclosed home leaves, only to find out that years later, he or she is still legally on title and still on the hook for property taxes, along with any other city liens or other liens which may have accrued during his or her absence. In a typical foreclosure, the bank takes possession of the home, then auctions it off to the highest bidder. But when the foreclosure soared after 2008 housing crash, the banks had trouble unloading certain properties. So to save money on taxes and other costs associated with seizing the home, the banks never officially foreclosed, leaving the homeowner on the hook to pay thousands, if not tens of thousands, in taxes and other liens which have accrued. So, to better answer your question, zombie foreclosures is what everybody sees as those vacant, abandoned homes. Those are generally called zombie foreclosures. Why? Because nobody lives there. Not necessarily to say that they're, homes for the walking dead. Although, to be honest, if you've seen some of the foreclosures I have, you wouldn't be surprised. Okay, so that's what a zombie foreclosure is. Now, this is actually kind of a big problem. Not just because of the fact that it's Halloween, but you see, unfortunately, zombie foreclosures, actually, according to Realty Track, they estimate that roughly 302,000 homes this year qualify as zombie properties because the owner has moved out, but the bank has not yet taken possession. So, why is this a problem? Well, zombie foreclosures lead to what I like to call blight. Blight is another way of saying urban decay. So, essentially, what that means is urban decay and blight is a process whereby a normally functioning city falls into disrepair, decrepitude, or deindustrialization, depopulation, or a changing population, restructuring, abandoned buildings, and it's usually indicated by high unemployment, fragmented families, political disenfranchisement, crime, desolate, and inhospitable city landscape. How does this have anything to do with zombie foreclosures? Well, that's where it starts. You have one abandoned home, you have two, you have an entire abandoned street. The next thing you know, you have zombie cities. Have you guys been to Detroit? Okay, so anyway, that's the problem with zombie foreclosures. Not only does it open the door up for crime, vandalism, theft, for all these vacant homes, but it also doesn't really bode too well for the city, for the economic prosperity of the city, or to get anybody to really move into the city. So, zombie foreclosures are a problem. How can we fix zombie foreclosures? Well, a lot of the services are actually doing the right thing, in my opinion. Obviously, the need to unload properties is paramount at this point. However, at the same time, who are they unloading the properties to? If they unload to an investor with the intentions of fixing and flipping, like so many do, the problem is many of these zombie foreclosures perpetuate additional zombie foreclosures. They remain stagnant listings. They become more zombies. So, to better answer the question, the problem with these zombie foreclosures isn't why do they exist, but how do we fix it? How do we solve the zombie foreclosure problem? Excellent questions. Well, to start, selling these zombie foreclosure properties to owner-occupied buyers or end users that have absolutely every intention of actually living in the property, raising a home, raising a family there, well, that's an excellent place to start. When you sell to an investor with little to no regard for the city, or what happens to the city, or the people living in the city, or the families affected as a result of this fix and flip, obviously is not in the best interest. So selling to somebody with roots in the city, that's what it's all about, ladies and gentlemen. And Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac have obviously taken a really big step in that direction with their First Look program. B of A shortly followed suit. And a lot of the lenders and servicers are actually doing this as well right now to encourage, more owner-occupied buyers in the city, which would help eliminate blight and urban decay. Okay, so moving on. We talked a little bit last week about the alleged backdating charges from Ocwen and what this has resulted. So I'm sure it's no surprise that every once in a while, guess what, folks? Lenders might make a mistake here and there. It does happen, as a matter of fact, a lot more often than I'd care to admit, to be perfectly candid. But regarding what we said last week about Ocwen's alleged foreclosure problems and their backdating problems resulting from that, I'm sure it's no surprise. As a result of these allegations, Ocwen stock tumble. Needless to say, originally when they were asked about the backdating letters that they sent out, their problem, what they said, was that it resulted in improper computer errors. So they blamed the computers for the problems, and the company said that about 70% of the borrowers who received the backdated foreclosure letters, loan modifications were done on about 5% of them. Now, unfortunately for Ocwen, this is not their only problem. If it were that simple, it might be a little bit easier for regulators to simply say, okay, well, you know what? Isolated incidents do happen. People do make mistakes. Unfortunately, this is just the beginning of the problems. Ocwen has been the subject of more than 13,500 loan-related complaints from consumers since the Bureau began fielding complaints nearly 3 years ago. Consumer logged a higher number of mortgage-related loan complaints for only 2 institutions, larger than Ocwen, and those other 2 that got larger complaints, B of A and Wells Fargo. Not a huge surprise there. Okay, so the complaints were related to mortgages, making the category the highest number of complaints. Now, why is this such a big deal, and what exactly did they do wrong? Is the backdating a problem? It's a pretty big problem. That is illegal. However, that's not the only issue. The issue is what they were backdating, what specifically they were backdating. Now, many of you have heard about the January 2014 servicer settlement, which included a $23 billion payout. A lot of big servicers were involved. Well, one of the stipulations in this servicing agreement was that a certain number of loan modifications had to be worked out. Now, according to this case against Ocwen, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau issued a statement saying that some mortgage servicers had violated the new servicing rules, Ocwen included. That went into effect in January 2014. One of the violations examiners found most common was a failure on the part of the servicer to convert trial loan modifications into permanent loan modifications. So, what does this mean? Well, it means the servicer says, okay, great. Tell you what, your payment is $1,400 a month. We're going to give you a loan mod. Your new payment will be $800 a month. Go ahead and make those payments. So, obviously, the borrower is happy about the new terms. He makes the payments, only to then discover, after 6 months of making payments on time, the loan mod disappears and goes back to the old way, or changes and reverts to a higher rate other than what was initially agreed upon. Needless to say, this is, for the layperson out there unfamiliar, this is what I like to call the bait and switch. Not too cool, Ocwen. Not too cool. All right, so moving on to what everybody wants to talk about, everybody wants to hear. Guilty or not guilty? We actually have several of them to discuss this week. I'm sure you guys are dying to find out which ones. First, I'll just get into some brief news regarding a company many of you may or may not have heard about, American Realty Capital Properties. What is this company? Well, this company is one of the largest real estate empires and was battered Wednesday by its disclosure of an accounting mistake and subsequent cover-up that forced the resignation of two executives, cut its flagship company's stock value by 19%, and sparked a regulatory probe. Needless to say, when you hide assets, when you shuffle things around, I can tell you, it doesn't take a forensic accountant to figure out what happened. But I can promise you, once it's gotten to that point where there are forensic accounts involved, there's really not a whole lot they're not going to find out. So, for anyone out there that has any type of devious or mischievous plans to those nature, I can assure you it's only a matter of time. It's better to take the high road and be above board. Now, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong. So, that's what happened with them. Now, moving on to some more interesting items. Okay, so a California man recently sued his lender. Why did he sue his lender? Going back to what we recently discussed, he sued his lender because he got a temporary loan mod, which, after making the payments, he then subsequently discovered, guess what? The payments went higher and higher and higher. Eventually, he got into a big argument with his lender. I won't tell you the name, but the initials are PHH. So, he got into an argument with his lender and decided he was going to stop making the payments. Okay, well, that's a noble cause. That's admirable. There's better ways, folks. Anyway, after he stopped making the payments, the lender proceeded with foreclosure filings, did not officially foreclose. Prior to the foreclosure, the man sued his lender. Now, interestingly enough, how this happened, I have no idea, but the man actually won $16.2 million in a verdict awarded to the California homeowner in July, after he sued PHH Mortgage. Now, after the $16.2 million settlement, as you can imagine, everybody was looking into it to try to figure out how this is just. What portion of this was actually awarded punitively, compensatorily, and was any of it actually fair? Well, $15.7 million of the $16.2 million was deemed to be punitive charges against the lender, with more than $500,000 awarded in compensatory damages. I know what you're thinking. That's ridiculous. He didn't even get foreclosed on. He didn't even lose the home. And he got all this money for doing what? Excellent question. For doing nothing. For doing what many Americans do, complaining that they've been the victim, that they've been taken advantage of, and they want money for their trouble, for their emotional stress, and for the tough time they had to pick up the phone and maybe call a lawyer and ask him what he thinks about it. Anyway, why do I mention this? Because in my opinion, justice has been served, not by this verdict, but by the subsequent reversal of the verdict, which came out only a few days ago, where the judge changed the $16.2 million number to $160,000. He thought that was a little bit more fair, especially considering the fact that the man never even lost his home. He was not foreclosed upon, and yeah, he might have been the victim of the runaround, which many California homeowners are, but do they all receive $16.2 million settlements? No, they don't. So I'm happy about the fact that the judge reversed that decision. That is good news, and that culminates our discussion of guilty or not guilty this week, with the exception of one quick one which I'd like to talk about. Foreclosure fraud. Key leader in foreclosure rescue scam sentenced to 10 years in prison. A Huntington Beach man, who federal authorities say played a significant role in nationwide foreclosure scam that includes several Sacramento area homeowners among its victims, has been sentenced to 10 years. Jeremy Michael Head was sentenced Wednesday in Sacramento, according to a the U.S. Attorney's Office news release. A federal jury found him guilty in May 2013 after a nearly 4-week trial before U.S. District Attorney Kimberly Mueller. Head's brother and co-defendant was also sentenced to 35 years in prison. Now, what exactly did he do? Well, through misrepresentation, fraud, and forgery, the Head brothers and their associates substituted straw buyers for their victims' homeowners on title of properties without the homeowner's knowledge. The straw buyers were often friends and family members of the defendants. Once the straw buyers were on title to the homes, the defendants applied for mortgages to extract the maximum available equity from the homes, then shared the proceeds from the equity and the rent the homeowners paid them. Gotta love it, right? The victim homeowners were left with no homes, no equity, and damaged credit ratings. That's a shame. Now, between January 2004 and March 2006, the scam netted more than $15 million in fraudulently obtained funds from scores of homeowners, including about a half dozen Sacramento area residents. The case came to the attention of the FBI when a North Highland victim reached an FBI economic crimes agent who was taking calls about the complaints. The article goes on and on and on, but why do I mention this? Because it seems to me like almost every day in the media there's someone else with a great idea on how to make millions of dollars doing something that is questionably legal. In his mind, in everyone else's mind, obviously illegal. You should not be doing that. So, the moral of the story is, if you ever come into a situation where you think something is questionably legal, in my mind, that means obviously legal from everybody else's point of view. So, try asking somebody. Run the scenario by a friend, a family member, a coworker, or better yet, a lawyer, and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this scam. What do you guys think about it? Do you think it might work? Do you think I might get caught? Now, that's just my opinion. I could get wrong, but generally speaking, crime doesn't pay. So, I'll leave you guys with that note, and happy Halloween, everybody. I hope everybody has some good costumes planned out. And please do not fear the zombie foreclosures. And if you see any zombie homes with parties going on, I can assure you, if I had to guess, the listing agent did not approve of that. So if you happen to know who the agent is and you see zombie foreclosures with extravagant Halloween parties going on, call the police. That's it, folks. Thanks, everybody, for joining me for this week's discussion on real estate. Again, this is Z Real Estate. My name is Jonathan Zuckerman. I can always be reached at zbanker@aol.com or my cell phone number, 909-559-5275. My website, jonathanzuckerman.com, zrealestate.net, or Johnny Z Banker at Twitter, or Z Real Estate on Instagram. Thank you so much, everybody, and I look forward to hearing your comments, particularly what you liked, what you didn't like about my discussion. And until then, have a great week, everybody.